行け！
After going through the stuff I'd written to recap a decade of anime, I saw that you were really into the action anime one. Then, it dawned on me. Why don't I take one request to recap some of the great action anime from a decade further? So here we are. We'll take another deep dive down memory lane, and I'll try and give you a review of what the anime world was back like in the 2000s. Now, don't quote me on this, but I think that this is where a lot of the current anime fans got their start. Oh, in the glorious 2000s. For some of us, including me, these shows are the ones that paved the way for us to become the anime fans that we are today. I'll be running with series clause this time, so that means that I won't be counting sequels for picking my show of the year, although I've learnt my lesson from the previous video. What that means is that really excellent sequels that went far beyond their prequels will get an honourable mention at least. But, you know, before we talk about the shows that have made their marks on history, how about we look at a game that began to make its mark in the mobile gaming community just a couple of years ago? Yes, I'm talking about the sponsors of this video, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a fantasy-themed RPG that takes you to the world of Teleria, where you've got to gather armies, muster your forces, and liberate the kingdom from the Dark Lord Siroth. But what good is a game without a constant slew of challenges headed your way? Introducing the Doom Tower, a prison made to lock up the nastiest villains the world's ever seen before. Well, after thousands of years, the seal's slowly being undone, and it's only a matter of time before these villains come out and raise havoc. So it's up to us heroes to go in there and finish the job for good. These tough bosses are no slouch, and they'll demolish all those who dare enter unprepared. Team composition, strategy, properly trained specialists, you need to use everything you've learned to even stand a chance against these behemoths. Besides that, Raid has other new stuff coming up this month. Headlining those is the new feature that allows you new ways to use your champions, the Guardian Ring. Use this new system to break through the limits and become even more powerful. Not to mention that the game will be implementing an exciting and extremely anticipated feature in December. If you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan my QR code and you'll get the epic hero Chinoru, who's amazing in the Doom Tower, 200k silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard, so you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in-game. All this treasure is waiting for you here, and so am I. Keep in mind these rewards will be only available for new players and only for the next 30 days. So, what are you waiting for? Jump on the Raid hype train now. 2000. When everyone looked to the year 2000 as the end of the world, or a massive reckoning which would break computers everywhere, it was the anime world that opened with a bang. You see, back then, the world didn't have 50 shows to watch every season, and anime series typically ran for way longer. These long runners were the norm as far as popular anime that saw light outside of Japan were concerned, and so are the shows that had anywhere from 20 to 30-ish episodes. Among those, I feel my pick for the year 2000's anime would have to be Hajime no Ippo. Yep, the fan-favorite anime did get its start in October of that year, and it kickstarted a franchise that would eventually give us nearly 100 episodes of hyped fights, intense drama, and a journey that let us experience the blood, sweat, and tears these fighters go through in their road to absolute glory. For this year, though, it was a very, very close call. In terms of being a straight-up action series full of hype fights, Ippo takes this one easily, but in terms of fantasy adventures with a more balanced narrative, Inuyasha's pretty damn good. It's isekai before it was cool, and it captured the hearts of the youth worldwide. It's a phenomenon that dragged boys and girls into anime thanks to the romance, the adventure, and the cool and cute characters. Now, I personally felt that the only thing hampering Inuyasha is how the plot seems to show little progress at some point, and the amount of fillers, something that it shares with a lot of long-running shonen around this time. This year also introduced us to cult classic FLCL. Oh, and Sayuki got its start here too. Journey to the West full of Fujo bait and legitimately awesome action? Count me in. 2001. 2021's the year where one of my favourite childhood shonen got its start this year. Its name, Shaman King. Ever since I was young, the world of spirits had always captivated me, and this is the series that showed me how cool it is through the lens of anime. By all regards, I think that Shaman King could have taken the crown for 2001's action anime of the year, except it couldn't quite hold on to the momentum later on. I mean, don't get me wrong, the second half of the anime had some really cool moments, and I stand by my opinion that some of the anime-only compromises turned out better than their manga counterparts. For me, I think that the crown this year belongs to Baki. Baki at that time was an innovator. It pushed the boundaries of what people considered can be normal for a modern-day fighting show and dazzled everyone with its absurdities and over-the-top fighting. A stark contrast from Ippo, definitely. While Baki didn't become quite as popular as a lot of its peers around this era, there's no denying its legacy. Not every show could get continuations decades ago, but our boy Baki did it with a bang. Actually, now that I think about it, I've been leaning towards fighting shows for 2 years already. Don't worry, it's all going to change next year because a storm is about to shake the anime world. 2002. If we're talking about influence and legacy, there's absolutely no doubt that 2002's anime of the year is Naruto. The show that shaped the 2000s anime world outside Japan got its start this year, and it was a runaway success. Now, you can say what you want about Naruto, there's really no denying the lasting influence it left on the anime world though. How many people started getting into the medium back then? I'm sure there were hordes of them, and you've got this jumpsuit wearing ninja and his edgy lightning pal to thank for that, you know. I don't want Naruto to overshadow the blessings the anime world gifted us this year though. Full Metal Panic for one, and it's one of the mecha shows that are dear to my heart. If you want more sci-fi goodness, let me remind you that 2002 is also when Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex released. Also, I don't know how many people watched this one, but I loved Get Backers. It's another shonen that debuted in 2002, and I really enjoyed following the duo's adventures as a young kid. I'm pretty sure that it's the show that opened the eyes of many anime fans to the concept of traps too, if that's anything. 2003. With Naruto fever being in full throttle here, it's not easy to see why a lot of shows got overshadowed. Still, some brave contenders rise up to the challenge with mixed results. In the forefront of those is FMA, the original one. People vastly hype Brotherhood over the original FMA to the point that I think that the latter's become underrated. Make sure you chime in on that one in the comment section if you think so. The anime world around this time also seems to be toying with the idea of hard sci-fi a lot. While cyberpunk or hard sci-fi settings weren't as big of a trend as isekai in the past few years, the selection of key action anime is pretty telling. You had Ghost in the Shell and FMP the previous year, and 2003 gave us Technolize, Last Exile, Gungrave, and my favourite pick for anime of the year, Kino's Journey. Kino's Journey is an adventure anime that has quite the different approach. You'd expect shows like this to have a gunslinging protagonist who goes from town to town, shooting down the bad guys and just generally being cool. However, Kino's Journey is quite contemplative. Instead of a long narrative, the series is episodic and focuses more on the wide range of characters and cultures in its very vast world. It's quite the intelligent show that deals with a varied spectrum of themes. Now, it's a unique approach that caught me off guard when I first watched it, and I think that it was around that time that I really saw the power of the medium. Despite me still loving the action shows more, Kino's Journey was an eye-opener. It's a show that I'd gladly recommend to anyone to this day. 2004. 2004 was quite the eventful year, don't you agree? Quick Google searches would reveal that this is the year that popular shows like Elfen Lied and Gantz made their debut, continuing with the sci-fi train as you can see there. Now, with a dash of psychological thrown in, it's really an aesthetic that you can associate with this era of anime, right? The more Western-oriented aesthetic and ambiance that a number of people are wishing that anime would go back to. Oh, and Samurai Champloo, a show that I've repeatedly talked good things about, also got its start in this year. It's got a very unique atmosphere to it that makes it stand out so much. Until now, when you say that hip-hop samurai anime, there can only be one of course, and it's a show that I'm imploring you to watch. This year's pick, however, well, what I think is visually the coolest among the big three shonen is Bleach. I don't talk about Bleach as much as One Piece or Naruto in my videos, but make no mistake, it's the most stylish amongst the three of them. It's got that oomph that makes it so awesome to like. Maybe it's the character designs, which exude rebel teen energy, something that I vastly prefer over the more whimsical and cartoony designs of most shonen before this era. There's also the Shikai and Bankai that came in all shades of cool, thanks to the brilliance of Daite Kubo. Ghostbusters turned into Dragon Ball Z with magical swords, samurais, and battles against gods. How epic can you be? Easily anime of the year. 2005. For me, 2005 is where the transition to the next era of anime started. While the anime sphere was quite heavy on sci-fi, the midpoint of the decade's where things started transitioning to softer sci-fi. Instead of robots and steampunk settings, we now begin to see more anime taking place in the modern neighborhood, filled with supernatural elements. Law of Ueki comes to mind, and I hope that more people will share their fond memories of this one. Then, a perennial favorite of mine with that urban fantasy setting is Shakugan no Shana. I do have a strong bias for it, and I came really close to crowning it this year. Ultimately, it stands as a runner-up, side by side with my personal pick for this year, Blood Plus. Way before the vampire craze, Blood Plus gave us a glimpse of it as it combines horror and action that, while may not seem too original in terms of premise, ended up being an awesome ride. It's an action show that carefully treads the line between PG-13 and R-18, and as teenagers, nothing can be cooler for us back in the day than that, right? Overall, Blood Plus is probably one of the more generally good shows that I can recommend to people thanks to its high-octane action and sleek art and animation. Plus, not a lot of fan service or cliches often associated with anime these days, and that's speaking in a relative manner. Still, the high fantasy and medieval-esque settings aren't dead, with that Basilisk, Tsubasa Chronicle and Trinity Blood. For those who wanted some hot-blooded sports action, 2005 also gave us Eyeshield 21. 2006. 2006 is a banger. There's no other way to put it. So let's get on with this amazing year. As said in the series clause, standout sequels will be given shout-outs, so here's to Hellsing Ultimate. Thanks for your help in making 2006 awesome, good friend. Dean Stay Night. It also made its debut in 2006, and we at the time had no idea what the Fate series would end up turning into the following decade. It shows that some of the most hyped anime, movie trilogies, and video game cash cows all had to start from humble beginnings. Rei Kugimiya continues to roll in, cementing her status as the 2000 Tsundere Queen with a familiar of Zero. It's around this time that the Shana clones have started coming around, and Kugimiya herself would continue getting star-making roles the next few years in non-action anime, mind you. Shonen shows continue trying to make their mark with varied levels of success. While D. Grayman is now more known for the manga going on hiatus, it was a big deal back then. The latter can be said of Hitman Reborn, although that manga had the benefit of ending conclusively to a mixed reception. 2006, though, came down to two mega hits that shaped the anime landscape. On one hand, you have Code Geass, hailed by many as one of the greatest anime ever made. It's not hard to argue with the facts. It's such a cultural landmark that continues to get new movies and series made, and it really made such a big impact with its masterful mixing of genres. You get the mecha, the psychological, the political, peppered by the handsome guys and waifus. It would have been a no-brainer to give Code Geass the crown, but it unfortunately ran into another powerhouse series of 2006, Gintama. Gintama also does the genre mixing well. Comedy, action, drama, need I say more? It goes all out in parodies and gives you fits of laughter before slamming you with some of the most epic sword fights and brawls that you've ever seen in anime. Then, it hits you hard with touching backstories that will stick with you for years to come. Gintama's truly an amazing anime that recently got a send-off whose quality is just as it deserved. Both shows are very good contenders for Anime of the Year, and I've got to give Gintama the edge just ever so slightly. Let me leave 2006 with this question. Will you get with Gintama over Code Geass, or will you have it the other way round? 2007. After the blockbuster year that 2006 was, it would understandably be hard to get quite on that level, and honestly, it kind of felt that way too. While 2007 didn't have any hits that could be on par with Code Geass, it did have some heavyweights of its own. Look at it this way, 2007 is the year that unleashed Gurren Lagann to the world, and we all know how that went. A hot-blooded visual spectacle that people remember and love to this very day. I'd also consider 2007 the year of action movies, if anything. Just as a footnote, this is the year we got the first Garden of Sinners, the first of the Eva Rebuild movies, as well as Sword of the Stranger. More underrated hits continued in this year, with Moribito and Darker Than Black, the latter decisively more popular. And the Western aesthetics in anime are also alive with Claymore, Afro Samurai, and my pick for this year, Baccano. What makes Baccano so good? Well, I could start with a nice mixture of genres along with a slight supernatural backdrop. If you've noticed actually, a lot of my picks so far have this thing where contrasting genres like comedy, drama and action get mixed in a way that one element doesn't hamper everything else, and instead it all just complements each other. It makes the show easily introduced to newbies, and it really helps if the show is devoid of the usual fan service or extreme violence that a lot of people who didn't know better would actually associate with the medium. Amongst those shows, I think that it's Baccano that does this balancing act the best, while pairing it with those good old oldies feel in terms of atmosphere and tone. I wouldn't call it emblematic of what you'd expect of these hidden gem anime of this era, but it's one of those shows that you can take one look at and immediately get a flashback of a bygone era in anime's history. It's also got a dub with a stellar reputation, so you might want to check that out too. 2008. As we approach the end of the decade, we start seeing those big hitters. Not to say that these shows are any less good, but it's just that the action series around this time never reached the influence the previous big hitters had. Off the top of my head, the most popular amongst the 2008 batch is possibly A Certain Magical Index, yet another urban fantasy that I love. Look, I just love these urban fantasies with supernatural elements and pseudo-harems if it's not obvious by now. In its time, Index was wildly popular and spawned numerous spin-offs. While it's a shell of itself now in terms of popularity, the A Certain series of anime still ends up making a bit of noise when new titles get announced. I think more people like Railgun a lot better though. 2008 also had Black Butler, probably on par with Index in terms of popularity. The first season, I really loved it. The second season, not so much. But it's still a landmark show that got a lot of female fans into the whole anime thing. It's not just for the girls though, remember, and I'll vouch for the interesting developments and plot that the first season gave us. Start for the premise and the banger opening by Sid, stay for the suspenseful plot and the action. Ultimately, the win goes to Soul Eater. While the previous two titles have their niches, and Index in particular has a universe that's a can of worms which isn't quite different from the Fate series, Soul Eater is a more accessible show to get into. It's an entertaining supernatural action show that has a little of everything and could help a prospective viewer ease into an anime watching habit, while lacking the gratuitous levels of fan service that the creators' Otherworld Fire Force had gotten flack for. Other niche hits in this era include Birdie the Mighty and Real Drive. If the synopses interest you, you should definitely check those ones out. 2009. Now, I find myself in a bit of a bind. Remember the series clause? It prevents me from outright crowning what many consider to be one of the best anime of all time. Yes, the king of my anime list, everyone's favourite FMA Brotherhood. The title's well deserved too. Personally, I think perfection is something that is statistically impossible, but FMA Brotherhood just has so many things going for it. Whether you like it for the plot, the character stories, the drama, the art, the themes and meaning, or just all of it, FMAB has something that would strike deep and embed itself into your heart for years to come. Heck, I'd throw the show into contention for anime of the decade, and I'm confident that it would definitely get the win. That's just how good it is. With the consensus action anime of the year out of the running, what are we left with then? Well, Phantom? Eden of the East? Sengoku Basara? Kanan? Oh, Fairy Tail also got its start this year, so let's go with that one. It's not a debate that among those I mentioned, Fairy Tail is by far the show that gets the mainstream appeal. A light-hearted adventure show that takes us through the sights and sound of hero Mashima's colourful world managed to garner quite a lot of love from anime fans. You can say what you want about the latter part of Fairy Tail and the memes about Nakama power, fake deaths and fan service, but the magic was literally there in the first few arcs. That part of the show really displayed Mashima's pedigree in writing light adventures and serious plots, along with creating characters that you all grow to love and care about. 2010. We've reached the end point of the video. So what does the anime world look like? Well, some show called K-On! Was raising eyebrows left and right and ushering a new age of KyoAni dominance, bringing in loads and loads and loads of cash through merchandise. In the action side of things, well, since we're in the topic of fan service already, why not give High School of the Dead a passing mention? Anime trying to get into the impending zombie media craze with this anime that with no doubt immediately makes anyone think of Japan with one look at the character designs. Nura Rise of the Yokai Clan is also such an underrated shonen. It never quite became as big as those in the tier of, say, Reborn, which I think is just criminal considering how intriguing the series' backdrop was, and I was thoroughly invested in the characters, their dynamics, and their personal drama. Plus, it made yokai really cool and got me interested in reading up on Japanese myths. Katana Gatari and Angel Beats are other landmark shows that got their start this year. Angel Beats already gets a lot of love, so I'd like to implore you to try out Katana Gatari. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with Araragi, Hitagi, and Friends. But hey, it's written by the same author as Monogatari. So, what's the action anime that takes the last crowning spot? Durarara. It's ironic that I picked Durarara for 2010 when I gave the victory to Bakano a few years back, because the two series are strikingly similar, being written by the same author. Durarara gives us a lot of the same that we love about Bakano, only in a more modern setting. You get the great art, the interesting characters, and a surprisingly complex narrative that opens up the idea of how much perspectives matter. While I won't say that the characters are terribly complex, they have a charm that makes them stand out and attractive in their own ways. It's not the perfect anime, but it's got a storytelling style that sets it apart from its peers from the same year and a unique approach that makes it stand out to people looking to get into anime as a whole. So how did you find this decade in review? Was there anything that I forgot to mention that you think should have been included? Well, don't hesitate to tell me. I had a great time writing this one and going through some of my most cherished memories as a fan. And if you felt the same, why don't you give a like to the video and share it with your friends too. Doing so will help the algorithm, and so will going through my channel and finding something that you might like. My Patreon and channel memberships are also open, and I really love your help and support with that. That's going to do it for now, and I'll see you in the next list.